After 14-year-old Graham Young poisoned his entire family, murdering his stepmother and seriously injuring his father and his sister, he was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security insane asylum. In the communal dorms, Graham developed a distaste for an inmate named John Barrage due to his incessant snoring at night. And within a few weeks of Graham's arrival, Barrage died of cyanide poisoning. Psychiatrists were baffled as to how cyanide could have poisoned him, as there was no cyanide anywhere near the vicinity. Graham corrected them, pointing out the copious amounts of laurel bushes surrounding the structure. They dismissed the statement and ruled the death a suicide. For whatever reason, Graham's doctors were convinced that Graham was growing out of his strange obsessions with poisons, and he was released after only 8 years. As he left, he told a nurse, "When I get out, I'm going to kill one person for every year I've been locked in this place." The newly released 23-year-old returned to his old stomping ground, boasting to everyone in his past that he was back on the streets, reminding them all of the scary poisoner he was. He moved into a hostel and applied for jobs. Dr. Udwin, the psychiatrist who approved Graham's release, provided him with a letter for the job that stated while Graham had been hospitalized for having a severe personality disorder, he had made a full recovery and was completely fit for work. There was no mention of his history with poisons. Graham then went to London and used the same fake ID he used when he was 14 in order to get a new batch of thallium and antimony. He accepted a job in 1971 as a store clerk in a photography company and offered to become their main tea maker. Shortly after he started, colleagues began getting sick. Bob Eagle, a war vet, was hospitalized for numbness in his fingers and the inability to move without agonizing pain. He eventually became paralyzed and was unable to speak. He died 10 days later. Fred Biggs, another older man, began to suffer from the same symptoms, and over time his skin began to peel off. He later became paralyzed, blind, and died. In his chemist's diary, later discovered by authorities, Graham Young stated he was annoyed at how long it was taking Biggs to die. Many other people got sick. Some vomited regularly with intense pain. Others lost their hair, were rendered impotent, and were described by doctors as looking like three-quartered plucked chickens. They all began to worry that maybe it was the chemicals in the shop, but the doctor ruled it out. No one had a clue what was happening, and the doctors were baffled. Graham then decided to offer up his theory to one of the doctors. Could it be thallium, he asked? And why had thallium been ruled out? At first, doctors dismissed Graham, but later decided to tell police. You see, before Graham Young, thallium had never been used as a poisoning substance in Britain, and death by thallium is an incredibly painful experience. Days, weeks, months of agony, excruciating stomach pains, violent sickness, diarrhea. Patients lose their hair and suffer thickening and scaling of the skin, and weakness of the limbs leading to paralysis. Victims typically die due to an inability to breathe. Graham loved writing down every last gruesome symptom that each of his victims suffered, recording them and plotting analytical graphs. But this fetishistic documentation proved his downfall. When they searched his flat, they found framed pictures plastered all over the walls of certain German dictators and leaders, as well as images of emaciated figures holding bottles marked poison, clutching their throats as their hair fell out. And under his bed, they found his notebook with all of his poisoning documentations. Once in custody, he boasted about the killings and laughed mockingly and wanted to be the most infamous poisoner of all time. He was very proud to be the first in Britain to use thallium as a poison. He was convicted of 2 murders and 2 attempted murders, and the blood drained from the jury's faces when they learned that he had been convicted of poisoning people earlier in life and had already been locked up in maximum security and was released. And media reports were outraged. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear my analysis.